Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human cognition.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm doing very well, thank you. Ready for, well, a pretty profound topic today.
I'm great, thank you. And yes, absolutely. Today we're tackling what might just be the most fundamental issue in all human consciousness.
I think you're right.
We're not just looking at the brain's mechanics, we're looking at the one variable that drives it all: mortality.
Precisely. The source material we're examining is fascinating because it frames the end of life not as, a failure or a conclusion.
Yeah.
It frames it as the very foundation, the thing upon which a meaningful, conscious life is built. It's the starting gun, really, not the finish line.
So our goal for you listening is to really understand how the knowledge that we will die, how that shapes everything.
Every decision.
Every great quest, our search for peace. We want to explore why facing the end is maybe the ultimate shortcut to living right now.
Okay, so to set the stage, let's start with the basics, the biological reality. What actually happens when a biological system shuts down?
Right, the clinical definition.
Well, yes, it's the cessation of the body's functions, but the key concept here, the scientific one, is the irreversible loss of homeostasis.
Homeostasis.
Yeah.
That's the body's ability to keep everything stable inside, right? Temperature, chemistry, all within a very, very narrow range.
Exactly. Life is this active, constant fight to maintain that incredibly improbable state. The body is, it's fighting entropy every single second.
And death is when that fight is lost for good.
It's the permanent loss of that self-stabilizing function. When the body can no longer correct itself, that's it.
And what happens right after that loss? It says so much about what life actually is. The moment that organizing force is gone, the whole structure just starts to fail.
It's entropy winning, finally. Once that competence to hold the physical structure together is gone, the body just dissolves. It returns to its component parts.
So life is the competence to stay whole.
And death is when that competence expires. But this is where it gets more complex. The sources make a crucial distinction. It's one thing to die physically, but they suggest some people they stop living long before that.
The difference between the biological end and the existential end.
Yes. Experiencing life at, a much lower level of vitality. They're present physically, but existentially, they're vacant.
And that vacancy leads us right into the core cognitive problem for humans. This is where we are completely unique. As far as we know, we are the only creatures with this burden, this complete awareness that we will die, and that it can happen at any time.
And that awareness creates a continuous underlying anxiety. It's a hum in the background. Think about an animal in the wild.
It sees a lion, it runs, the lion goes away.
And goes back to grazing immediately. It doesn't carry this constant low-grade knowledge that its existence has a totally unpredictable expiration date.
But we do. We can be sitting here perfectly safe talking, and yet that knowledge of the ticking clock, it's never really gone.
Which forces us into philosophy. It drives that universal search for purpose, the why are we here question.
The great human endeavor.
And the sources point to a fifth great quest that stems from this, the pursuit of immortality.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the resources we pour into that. Longevity research, cryonics. We spend billions trying to postpone the inevitable.
It's this massive high-tech effort that's really just driven by that primal cognitive anxiety.
But is it just anxiety? What if let's do the thought experiment from the sources. What if we took death off the table completely? What if we were immortal?
If we never died.
Yeah.
No.
The immediate thought is bliss, but the logical conclusion is something else.
It's much darker. The conclusion is that humanity would become entirely passive, functionless.
Why do anything if you have forever to do it?
Precisely. The source material points out that we even breathe to avoid death. It's that fundamental. If that need vanished, even breathing might lose its urgency.
I love the observation about children. When you ask them what they'd do if they were immortal, they often get it right.
What do they say?
Nothing. They're being purely logical. If you have infinite time, there's no reason to start now.
Why start today what you can put off for 1,000,000 years? Procrastination would become the default state of existence. Total stagnation.
So mortality isn't the problem. It's the engine. It's the motor that drives every single meaningful human achievement.
It is a profound gift disguised as a tragedy. It gives life its boundaries. It pushes us to learn, to improve, to create.
To leave something behind, a legacy, an idea.
It forces us to fill our container, so to speak, before our time runs out.
And yet, for being our single greatest motivator, we are terrified of talking about it.
Yes.
Don't bring it up, you'll spoil the mood. So we never consciously deal with this foundational truth.
It's a huge societal disconnect. We live in this state of denial. And you contrast that with, say, ancient traditions like Stoicism.
Memento mori.
Remember death daily. They understood it. They knew that reflecting on the end gives you the clearest possible perspective on the now.
If you live like you'll never die, you're always caught off guard when the time comes.
Always. And integrating that reality, that's the only real path to peace. The sources draw this beautiful linguistic link between presence or peace and being prepared.
Peace comes from readiness.
Exactly. If you're prepared for any outcome, you're at peace. If you're unprepared, you're anxious. And in this world, ultimate peace comes from being ready for the ultimate event.
So what does being ready actually look like day to day? It can't just be a morbid obsession.
No, not at all. It's actionable. First, it means shortening your hopes, not making these infinite 50-year plans in a finite world.
So you calibrate your goals against the fragile reality of now.
Precisely. And second, you build these daily rituals of readiness, settle your conflicts, minimize your debts, both financial and emotional.
And your relationships.
Greet and part with people as if it might be the last time. Make sure things are clear, honest, no broken hearts left unresolved.
That focus on the now is just so powerful. The idea that preparation can't be put off. It has to be at this very moment.
Think of the example they use. The commuter, the white-collar worker, driving through a beautiful city.
Oh, yeah.
They're crossing a bridge, incredible view all around them, but they're on their phone, worried about a meeting, stewing over some mistake from yesterday. They're completely absent.
They don't even see the view.
Not at all. Now, imagine a sudden moment of danger, a near fatal accident. In that split second, what's the only rational thing to do?
Look up, see the view, call a loved one.
Right. The urgency of death forces you into the present.
So by making immortal plans in a mortal world, as they put it, we're basically guaranteeing that we'll die with regret.
You're guaranteeing you'll have lived a life focused on a future that never fully arrived. The awareness of death isn't a tool for dying. It's the best tool for living right now.
Which brings us to the biggest question of all, the one about consciousness itself. Why do we want to be remembered? Is it just ego? Or is it something deeper?
It's tied to that fear of just ending. But the sources offer a comforting thought,
Which is,
we were unknown for 13.8 billion years before we were born. Being forgotten is just returning to a familiar state. Besides, the universe itself is going to end, so eternal physical remembrance is impossible anyway.
so physical permanence is off the table. The question has to change. It raises the possibility that the death of the body isn't the end of the knower, the self.
We have to seriously question the purely materialist viewpoint here. I mean, think about your body. The atoms are constantly changing.
They say you're a new person every 7 years or so.
Something like that, yes. But the self, your consciousness, feels continuous. The body is temporary, but the you persists.
The sources use a couple of powerful analogies for this.
They do. The first is the wave in the water. Consciousness is the energy, the wave. The body is just the water it's moving through for a little while.
When the wave passes, the energy isn't destroyed, it just moves on or rejoins the ocean.
And the second analogy is more like a piece of technology, the TV set. If you damage the brain, consciousness is affected. But that might just mean the receiver is broken. It doesn't mean the broadcast is stopped.
So smashing the TV doesn't stop the studio from transmitting the show? The brain is just the apparatus for experiencing this world. Its destruction doesn't necessarily end the signal.
This non-materialist view gets a surprising boost from modern cosmology, from what some call the information perspective.
Can you break that down for us?
The idea is that the universe is, at its core, a vast information system. Some theories suggest that even something falling into a black hole isn't truly lost.
Its information is preserved on the event horizon.
Exactly. So, by extension, maybe our entire existence, every experience, every thought, is ultimately preserved as information in the fabric of the universe.
We're not seeking immortality of the body, but immortality of the data.
Precisely. That ancient idea that what remains is a pleasant sound in the dome starts to sound a lot like enduring information.
And yet, strict materialism, the idea that it's all just atoms, is still such a dominant worldview. The sources call it a great illusion, a delusion. Why is that model so flawed?
Because it just can't account for our inner experience. It can't generate a conscience. It can't explain the subjective feeling of being me.
And it can't establish morality.
No. If it's all just physics, then anything is permissible. Justice, virtue, they become meaningless words. We mistake our simple models of reality for reality itself.
So death isn't a full stop. It's the foundational issue that, if we face it, forces us to live a focused, functional, and peaceful life. It's our greatest teacher.
It is, and true freedom requires more than just knowing this. It requires practice. The sources talk about the act of turning away.
Turning away from what?
From any system that limits you. Turning away from rigid materialism, from the noise of the crowd, from any narrative that pulls you out of your immediate functional reality. You have to consult your conscience and the world in front of you first.
That's an incredibly powerful way to frame it. So, coming back to this idea of our lives as information, the final question isn't about how long we live.
No, it's about quality.
So, a thought to leave you with. If every piece of information and knowledge from your life, your whole existence, is preserved in that universal data structure.
Are you currently living a life worthy of being archived? That is the real question of meaning.
A profound thought for all of us to consider. Thank you for this essential exploration. It was truly clarifying.
My pleasure. A discussion we all need to have. May everything be auspicious.